speak to Nathan Jeffay now. He's a freelance journalist. He's just returned from Israel. Nathan, thank you very much indeed for joining me on the programme. So one of the breaking news fragments that we're able to impart is that it looks as if Israel might not be about to instigate some kind of ground invasion of Gaza. Something else might be in the offing. What that is, I have no idea. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think people need to remember that the kind of absolute priority here is bringing back the Israelis who are in Gaza to Israel. So whatever the military assesses at any specific moment will be the best and most effective way to do that, that is what they will do. And if indeed any ground operation or any other plans for operation seems to have a large potential collateral damage of the Israeli hostages, then that is not something that Israel would choose to do. So there's probably constant assessments regarding exactly what's going to bring the best result in terms of the hostages who are there.
I want to talk to you about the Rafah exit from Gaza and the Egyptian response to letting people who the United Nations say are in pretty desperate straits into Egypt to safety. It's been suggested that there's room for them, that the Sinai might be a place where they could set up some kind of homes if only Egypt were to allow them entry. Only Egypt isn't so far opening its gates to what you might say are their brethren. I think they would say the same. So why not? What's happening there?
I mean, we need to remember that internationally, Gaza is this kind of hot potato that everybody talks about, but no one internationally has really wanted to get overly involved in. Let's remember that before 1967, Egypt was responsible, was there in Gaza, before the Six-Day War, before Israel took control of Gaza, and since then has really, moved away, resisted any suggestions that they should get back involved in Gaza because they just see it as kind of a bottomless pit of manpower, of military and humanitarian needs, and they're not prepared to kind of outstretch the arms and to help, which I think is very disappointing for a lot of people. There's a lot of Israelis as well who feel that Egyptian involvement in Gaza could help bring stability, but the Egyptians again and again refuse to have that involvement.
We all remember very freshly, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we all remember very clearly all the footage of Poland welcoming refugee after refugee after refugee from Ukraine. There was no question about opening their borders, opening their arms, opening their homes, and letting Ukrainians come in, and hoping it would save their lives as they tried to flee. Why isn't Egypt welcoming its brethren in the same way? Is it something to do with the government? It's been described as a dictatorship. And is it something to do with the current dictator's fear of the Muslim Brotherhood? What is going on there?
So I think there's kind of largely an absence of that humanitarian kind of impetus that has given refugees a lifeline in other parts of the world. And politically, there is a great hesitation for any of the neighbors around that neighborhood to bring in refugees, Palestinian refugees. Also, in kind of the internal politics of the Arab world, there's a concern about taking Palestinian refugees, resolving their status, and taking that piece out of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the fear of kind of giving the Israelis an easy ride, so to speak. And also from a security point of view, the Egyptians are very concerned about Hamas, which is an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is kind of homegrown in Egypt. So all of those factors come together to cause the Egyptians to take that step away.
And can you explain a little of what's going on the northern front, where Hezbollah have enormous caches of arms, which, everyone is fearing desperately they may decide to unleash, and if they do, the effect will be just unthinkable. So what is going on there at the moment?
Yeah, so one of the strange ironies of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is that people generally are much more familiar with Hamas from the southern border than Hezbollah, which is on the northern border. And the reason that's ironic is because Hezbollah is many, many, many times stronger than Hamas. Hezbollah is an Iranian-backed militia which is there over the northern border. It has huge, huge arsenals of rockets, huge strength, also power inside Lebanon's parliament. And what they're capable of would make Hamas's efforts pale in significance. And what we're seeing at the moment is the start of some fire over that northern border. Hezbollah is much more sparing with its firepower normally, but when it gets going, it is able to wreak absolute havoc and destruction. So there's great nervousness in Israel that Hezbollah could get involved from the northern border as Hamas is firing from the southern border. And that really does mean that Israel's under fire from both ends, which is kind of a bit of a nightmare scenario.
A bit of a nightmare. It's an absolutely hellish nightmare, isn't it? So you've just got back to the United Kingdom from Israel. So I'm going to ask you to look into the future for me just a little bit and tell me what you imagine, having been observing, being an expert on the area, what you imagine might unfold in the next, let's say, 24, 48 hours.
Well, I think we're going to see even more preparations towards a land conflict, or indeed troops in there by land, as I say. Kind of, the guiding principle will be trying to find these hostages, trying to locate these hostages. Hamas has managed to hide individual people in the past. Whether it can hide this number of people is completely unknown. So we're going to see those preparations steaming ahead. And on the international stage, Israel often has this window of sympathy, and Israel's challenge is also to keep that kind of diplomatic goodwill going. And that's very difficult when it's fighting in such complex circumstances.
Nathan, thank you very much indeed for joining me.